everybody. Welcome to the 2021 International eConference on Religious Trauma. My name is Dr. Darren Slade, and I'm the president of the Global Center for Religious Research, which is hosting this year's academic conference. Now, one of the great things about GCRR is that you're being joined by students, scholars, and specialists from all over the world, right from the comfort and safety of your own home. Now, something significant to note is that the Global Center for Religious Research has established the world's very first and most comprehensive psychiatric research group to study the causes, manifestations, and treatment options for those suffering from religious trauma. And GCRR has actually built a team of approximately 30 psychiatrists, therapists, sociologists, university professors, religion scholars, and PhD candidates from all over the world, all who specialize in the field of trauma research. Now, if you are a specialist and would like to join this international team, just reach out to GCRR through our website and we can give you more information there. But we do have to address one big problem, and that is in order for victims of religious trauma to receive help, we need to arrive at a place in our culture where religious trauma is accepted as a real condition. Unfortunately, the academic study of religious trauma remains in its infancy, especially when compared to other studies in mental health. And sadly, this means that there really are no exhaustive empirical studies to support what we've all experienced in the tens of thousands, which is that religious trauma exists and that it is a chronic problem within many religions. And as it stands, really only anecdotal case studies have been published so far, but nothing substantially empirical to actually prove it exists. So GCRR is intending to correct this gap of knowledge, and we would like to get your help with this. So we just recently set up a GoFundMe page in order to crowdsource the world's very first comprehensive empirical study on religious trauma. We want to conduct a massive sociological study on those traumatized by religion in the hopes of providing the foundational data necessary to educate and hopefully prevent religious trauma from occurring in the future. And you may be asking, why are we crowdsourcing this on GoFundMe? The sad fact is that all federal funding for mental health research has come to a screeching halt. And so we have to turn to the public for help right now. So rest assured, any and all donations that you give to this would go exclusively just to funding this study, and any amount that you could give would be extremely helpful. All you have to do is go to gofundme.com and then look for the religious trauma sociological study. And at the very least, please share this GoFundMe page across all your social media platforms so we can get the word out about this very important research project. And with that said, I'm very excited to be able to introduce Dr. Pamela Monaco. Dr. Monaco's discussion today is on drama trauma, contemporary American playwrights, and how they're revealing religious trauma in their own work. So Dr. Monaco is the interim vice president and the dean of instruction at Wright College in Chicago. As an English and theater professor, she has received her undergraduate degree from George Washington University and both of her graduate degrees, including her doctorate in English from the Catholic University of America. In addition to presentations and publications on theater, she's also fascinated by mystery novels featuring clergy sleuths, which I was not even aware existed until a few moments ago. So I think that's really incredible. With that, Dr. Monaco, thank you so much for doing this today. You have the floor.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you all for taking time on the Saturday of a Memorial Day weekend to listen to the work that I am doing and to be part of this impressive conference. This is a larger project that I am working on. It is so nice to have an audience. Someone in the last session posted in the chat that she was not a techie, neither am I. So please bear with me as I do the very old-fashioned called read a paper. I will try to be lively and engaging as I do this. Throughout the world, people are grappling with trauma, Our global pandemic has united us across boundaries of geography, age, health, and background as people recover from COVID, mourn the loss of loved ones, and tentatively venture from their homes and without masks. Some have received great solace from their faith through these dark times. Some have seen this pandemic as a sign of God's displeasure with us, and some have not thought of faith at all during this period. As the world reopens, we will begin to see the theater respond to this pandemic as playwrights and actors in memorial have brought to the stage the questions, the anxieties, the dilemmas of the present to audiences, prompting reflection on what we believe, how and why we believe, and what we can learn from our lived moments. Theater's relationship to religion and the dramatic exploration of trauma date to the Greek playwrights and Aristotle's work on theater and tragedy. Theater allowed and continues to allow a community to examine conflict, see failure and culpability, and reflect on better decisions and actions. Modern audiences continue to experience a catharsis of the emotions of pity and fear as we recognize the human frailty, temptation, and failure that unites us all. Of course, dramatic plots often have no element of religion or faith, but despite an increasingly secular society, a surprising number of playwrights continue to explore how religion shapes our identity and how individual faith, doubt, and practice can both create trauma and respond to trauma. This is not to say that theater has only explored religion and faith through this narrow lens. Some of the great successes of modern theater have been musicals about religion, religious practice, and religious conviction. The Book of Mormon, Sister Act, Jesus Christ Superstar, Godspell, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat speak to the hunger for a celebration of faith in our entertainment. This discussion explores how our current theater, that is, plays written and produced during the last 20 years, presents religious trauma. An examination of over 20 plays, not all of which will be referenced in the next 30 minutes, finds plays of and about the faithful and the fallen across various denominations, including Judaism, Amish, Shaker, Mormon, Evangelist Christian, Catholic, Protestant, and Islam. Across these religious communities and individuals, the theme of religious trauma generally seems to fall into several broad categories of conflict, and each category is not discrete. As you will hear, these boundaries are fluid, and to the extent possible during the time allotted, I will highlight where I see some overlap. I will expound today upon two of these broad categories. One, trauma arising from the struggle within one's own religion and sense of identity. And two, trauma is a result of the discordance between the tenets of one's faith and one's personal beliefs. I eagerly anticipate additional sources of religious trauma as depicted on stage. Let's first talk about trauma from one's disassociation with one's religious faith. For many people, one's belonging to a religion provides the frame and parameters of thought and action, and through a community of other believers, a definition of one's relationships to others. Through our participation in a religion, we may see ourselves as other, as separate from those in our world. We are not them. Some religions allow the faithful to recognize others of the faith through the wearing of particular garments, through practice of certain actions, and through the refusal of some more common practices among society at large. Our faith can, depending upon the religion, also place us within a long history of the faithful, going back in millennia. For most, this sense of belief and belonging brings fulfillment. However, this sense of otherness can also be a source of struggle, for we often want to belong to a larger community of people, to be more with the others with whom we work, with whom we participate in leisure activities, or get an education. I'd like to call attention to two plays that illustrate this source of trauma, Grand Concourse by Heidi Shrek and Disgraced by Akhtar. And here's an example, Grand Concourse. Grand Concourse appeared off-Broadway in 2014. It is a compact play, 1 act, 4 characters, set in a soup kitchen in a Catholic church in the Bronx on the Grand Concourse. The play centers on the character Shelley, a Catholic nun who has run the soup kitchen for 15 years. She is assisted by a young Hispanic man, Oscar, who is on staff, and many volunteers, including Emma, a young woman who shows up and wants to help. The 4th character, Frog, is one of the homeless who frequently wanders into the kitchen, the location for all the action. One is immediately struck by Shelley's efficiency, candor, and compassion. In describing Shelley, Oscar proclaims, quote, "She never stops working. She's got superpowers from God." And later, Shelley, she forgives everyone. Shelley soon reveals in a monologue the spiritual challenges she faces in prayer as she states to God, quote, "Forgive me, but it feels pointless lately, keeping these people alive with so little. And I think I have skills that might be more useful. My mind is atrophying here," end quote. She also mentions her estrangement from her attorney father to God, quote, "He's still hanging on, and I know I need to reach out to forgive, but sometimes I wish he would just hurry up and die. Forgive me." She says these prayers standing in front of a microwave she has turned on for a set number of minutes, for she has found it is challenging to pray without a timer, and a timer forces her to a minimal amount of prayer. Later in the play, we learn she became a nun following a high school assignment in which she learned about Dorothy Day. Writing and learning about Day was a strategy to irritate her atheist mother. We understand Shelley as an intellectual, motivated to make the world better through addressing human suffering, and someone who continues to struggle with her parents. The volunteer Emma has disrupted the equilibrium in both positive and negative ways. Lost herself, Emma is looking for acceptance and purpose, but in so doing concocts a story about having leukemia, even going so far as wearing a false portal and a stringy wig after her supposed chemotherapy. Frog, Shelley, and Oscar rally around her, and in so doing become better people together. Emma inspires them to make changes and work together on concrete betterment projects. When the lie is revealed, each bestows grace towards Emma, and in the warmth of forgiveness, Emma appears to mature and grow. However, when a selfish and heartless act results in the brutal death of Shelley's cat, the one tangible being Shelley has loved as her own, all is lost. In the last pages of the play, Shelley appears in a habit for the first time as she prepares to play a game of basketball with local kids before she literally throws away the habit. As she explains it, she has confronted evil and it won, for she describes Emma's action as evil. Quote, "It was evil, and I am relieved that tomorrow I will finally be rid of," she gestures to her habit, "whatever obligation this gives me to forgive you." She follows by saying, "I even believe that one day I might be able to forgive you, but the thing is, I don't want to. I feel lighter and freer and strangely happy, standing here right now, knowing that I don't ever have to forgive you, ever, 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 ever. If I never forgive you, that will be fine with me. I can live with it." The play ends with Shelley, alone on stage, looking as described as, quote, filled with increasing elation and eventually something resembling joy. It would appear that Shelley has used a career in ministry as a way of trying to deal with unresolved anger and alienation from her family. This is not to undermine what has obviously been an embodiment of good works and selflessness. Shelley models her life on Day's devotion to a socialist movement to serve the poor, the hungry, and the forsaken. She seeks, like Day, to find fulfillment through work for others, and appears to adhere to Day's maxim, quote, God expects something from each of us that no one else can do. Shelley has prayed to grant forgiveness to others, yet when called upon to do so over very personal loss, a loss that others may not completely understand, Shelley fails. Shelley suffers another trauma as the loss of an animal she loved, protected, and felt responsible for at the hands of one that she trusted, thus brings her in touch with tangible evil. She sees needless suffering in a very personal way and finds the commandment of faith inadequate. At this moment, she finds her faith asks too much, and she embraces the freedom of emotion without any obligation of should. Shelley brings a personal trauma to her life of faith, yet it was her dedication to Catholicism that generates the rupture that cannot be healed. She finds a joy and a freedom in her failure to practice the commandment to forgive. The trauma of faith dissipates when she gives up her religious life and faces a new path forward. Another play approaches this trauma of religious identity quite differently. Ayad Akhtar's Disgraced opened at the American Theater Company in Chicago in 2012 and had its New York premiere in October the same year. It won the Pulitzer Prize for Drama in 2013. Like Grand Concourse, it is a compact play, approximately 90 minutes in performance length, one set in a posh New York living room, brought to life by 5 actors. The main character is Amir, a Muslim by birth, who is married to a white artist, Emily. From the first scene, we learn that Amir is frequently the target of suspicion and racism, despite the efforts Amir has made to disassociate himself from his religious upbringing. He is a successful attorney working to make partner, married to a very white woman who has more interest in solidarity with Islam than Amir does. Amir has changed his last name to Kapoor rather than his birth name of Abdullah, as a way of seeing more Indian than Muslim. In her zeal for proclaiming enlightenment about Muslim heritage and culture, Emily is more current on Muslim practice and theory than Amir, who has proclaimed the supremacy of his Americanism, his national identity, over his religious identity. His separation from the politics of being Muslim in America is compromised when, at the behest of his wife and his nephew, he agrees to meet an imam accused of supporting terrorist activities. Amir agrees to meet the imam, not to serve as legal counsel, though. When the news media reports him as a retained counsel, this becomes the excuse to deny Amir the law partnership, which is instead given to a Black female colleague and friend. The climax of the play occurs at a dinner party Amir and Emily host with a Black attorney and her Jewish husband, who is also an art dealer friend of Emily, with whom Emily had a recent but brief fling. During the course of the dinner, identity politics come out, and as Amir tries to distance himself from the Quran by highlighting some controversial aspects, he does admit to some anti-Zionist sentiment. The scene ends with Amir and Emily alone, with Amir beating Emily for her adultery, which, according to the classic language of the Quran, is justified. The very last scene of the play involves the nephew asking for help after being picked up by the FBI for sentiments being interpreted as anti-American. Amir has promised to help. Trauma permeates this play. Both Amir and his nephew have sought to appear uber-American in order to limit the reactions too many have to them as suspect based on their names, their family heritage, and their skin color. 9/11 is not in the distant past, and anyone vaguely seen as Muslim is a potential terrorist to too many. One reads into Amir and Emily's marriage the appeal of Emily as the blonde American wife, and for Emily, Amir provided her additional credibility as she appropriates Middle Eastern artistic design into her American original work. We witness the use of prayer rituals, associations, and conversations as weapons to contain the suspected other. In this play, espousing a Muslim faith or having roots in a faith very directly creates religious trauma, resulting in an either-or dilemma: abandon the faith or radicalize. Amir's case shows abandonment does not erase the social stigma that can occur when espousing a so-called suspect faith. He has tried to be the perfect American, but the costs have been high. In the end, Amir has lost his wife, his job, and his sense of self while sacrificing his faith. This trauma has reinforced for both men, Amir and his nephew, a return to their faith, where they are accepted and where they can battle intolerance and hostility from the inside. The playwright Akhtar describes Amir thus, quote, "He's a Muslim by birth, of birth and origin, but has sort of strongly moved away from it and is very critical of Islam. But I came to understand what the play was really trying to get at was the way in which we secretly continue to hold on to our tribal identities, our identities of birth, of education, despite being more enlightened," end quote. I would counter that for Amir, he has been enlightened on the ability to ever be seen as more than Muslim in America. His religious identity provides a type of freedom to be himself and to push back openly against the racism and bigotry he and other Muslims have experienced. Denial of his faith heritage and community has not stopped the trauma he has experienced by those who see only a presumed religious identity. In fact, his own denial of his faith has left him alone, angry, and abused. When Amir and his nephew openly embrace their faith, they step away from the pain of living a double consciousness. Let's turn to a different approach to religious trauma, the trauma caused from discord between personal beliefs or ideas and the ideology and tenets of a particular faith tradition.